The door slammed with such force that the glass in the hallway rattled, a sharp, deafening sound that pierced the stillness of the afternoon. Sarah stood frozen on the threshold, her hands trembling by her sides, unable to comprehend what was happening. She had heard the words, but it was as if her mind refused to accept them. "Pack your things. I'm done. I can't live with a woman who can't give me children." She blinked several times, the shock hitting her like a wave, drowning her thoughts. It wasn't just the finality of his words that stunned her. It was the sheer cruelty behind them. For years, she had been his everything. They had built a life together, a future, or so she thought. She had given him her heart, her trust. And now, in one cold sentence, he was stripping all of that away. Her heart hammered in her chest as she tried to find her voice, but her throat was dry, constricted. "Please, I don't understand. We can figure this out. We've always figured things out together." But he wasn't listening. He was already turning away, his back to her, as though this conversation didn't even matter anymore. As though she didn't matter anymore. "I've made up my mind, Sarah," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You can't give me the one thing I wanted most in this life. I want a family. I want children. And you can't give me that." Her knees buckled beneath her as she felt a sharp, painful lump form in her throat. This couldn't be real. It wasn't real. She knew they had been struggling, there had been so many sleepless nights, endless doctor appointments, tests that led nowhere. The diagnosis had been clear: infertility. Sterility. But she had thought they were in this together. She had thought that their love was enough to overcome any challenge. He had promised her that. Over and over again. But now, it seemed like those promises meant nothing. "Please," she whispered, trying to hold back the tears that were already beginning to pool in her eyes. "Don't do this. You know I love you. I would do anything to make this work. Anything." His face remained unreadable as he stood by the door, his arms folded across his chest, eyes distant and cold. "I'm sorry, Sarah. But it's over." There was no warmth in his voice, no softness, no trace of the man she had married. He was a stranger now, a man she barely recognized. The anger in his eyes was unmistakable, and it stung. She didn't know what to do or where to go. She had no family in the area, no close friends to turn to. Her life, as she had known it, was gone in an instant. Her mind spun wildly as she stared at him, hoping he would change his mind, that he would come to his senses and take her in his arms, apologize for his outburst. But he didn't. He didn't even look at her. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, locked in the suffocating silence. Her thoughts were racing, but they made no sense. She tried to speak, to beg, to reason with him, but the words wouldn't come. How had they gotten here? How had it all unraveled so quickly? Her marriage had always seemed so perfect to everyone else. From the outside, it was a picture of success and happiness. They were the couple everyone envied, the young, wealthy pair with everything anyone could want. A sprawling mansion, luxury cars, endless vacations. To the world, they had it all. But now, standing here in the entryway of their home, Sarah realized how much had been built on a fragile foundation. Her infertility had always been a source of pain and self-doubt. The doctors had told her there was nothing that could be done. The one thing she had always dreamed of, becoming a mother, was out of reach. She knew it had affected their marriage, but she had always hoped that their love would be enough to get them through. They could adopt, they could find other ways to build a family. But now, none of that seemed to matter. His words echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the betrayal she felt. "I can't live with a woman who can't give me children. Please," she tried again, her voice breaking, desperate. "Please don't do this." But he didn't look back. He didn't even flinch. The weight of the moment crashed over her, suffocating her. She had never felt so small, so insignificant. Her life, her love, everything she had built over the years was now crumbling in front of her eyes. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. With shaky hands, she reached for the suitcase at her feet, her legs trembling as she bent down to unzip it. She had to leave. She had no choice. It was either that or stand here and beg for a love that was already gone. The sound of her packing was deafening in the silence. She could hear her own breath coming in ragged gasps, as if each inhale were a struggle. She didn't know where she would go. She had nowhere to turn. All she knew was that she couldn't stay here, in this house that had once been filled with promises, but now felt like a prison. As she shoved her clothes into the suitcase, the tears came. She couldn't stop them. They blurred her vision, making it harder to see, harder to focus. Her chest ached, as though someone had ripped her heart out and left a gaping hole in its place. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her life, had just cast her aside. And there was nothing she could do to fix it. When the suitcase was finally packed, she stood up slowly, her body shaking with exhaustion. She took one last look around the room that had once been filled with laughter and warmth, but now felt empty and cold. She didn't want to leave. She didn't want to walk away from everything she had known. But the choice had already been made for her. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she whispered softly, but the words seemed to fall flat in the air. She turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. She wasn't sure where she was going. But she knew she couldn't stay here, in this house of broken dreams. As she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her face, sharp and unyielding. The lights of the mansion flickered behind her, casting long shadows on the ground. It felt as though everything was closing in on her, as though she were being swallowed whole by the darkness. And yet, despite the overwhelming sense of loss, there was something else. Something she couldn't name, something she couldn't quite grasp. A flicker of something she couldn't place, a strange sense of hope that had yet to fully fade. It was the beginning of the end, but in a way, it was also the beginning of something else, something far more mysterious, something she never could have expected. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to imagine. The weeks that followed Sarah's abrupt departure from her once perfect life were a blur. She floated through the motions, each day merging into the next. The luxurious mansion that had once been her home now felt like a distant memory, a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. But as hard as it was to accept, she knew she had to move on. Where else could she go? There was nowhere to hide from the reality that her marriage had crumbled in a single, harsh moment. Her world had been torn apart, and now, she was forced to rebuild it from the ground up, alone. She rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, far from the life she had known, away from the constant reminders of her past. The apartment was modest, and the rent was cheap, but it gave her the privacy and solitude she needed. In the beginning, that was all she could handle. The thought of facing anyone, of hearing their pity, made her stomach turn. She had no energy for the world outside of her tiny apartment. The first few days, she didn't leave the apartment. She sank into her bed, curling up in the silence, allowing herself to grieve. She had never been the kind of person to wallow in self-pity, but everything felt so unfair. She had loved him so deeply. And yet, he had thrown her away like she was nothing. Her friends called, but she ignored their calls. They didn't know what to say. They had all admired her and Michael's seemingly perfect marriage. They didn't understand. No one did. What happened to love? What happened to standing by each other, for better or for worse? She didn't have answers. She was barely holding herself together. As the days dragged on, Sarah tried to find some semblance of purpose. She enrolled in a local yoga class, forcing herself to leave the apartment for the first time in a week. It was a small step. But the movement, the breathing, the focus on her body, anything to get out of her own mind, helped, even if only for an hour a day. But there was still a hole inside her. A feeling of emptiness that nothing seemed to fill. She started to feel like a shadow of the woman she used to be. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, or if she even mattered. Months passed, and Sarah began to adjust to her new life. She started a modest job at a local art gallery, far removed from the high-powered corporate world she had once been a part of. The work was easy enough, though it didn't come with the status she had been used to. Still, it gave her structure, a reason to leave the apartment each day, and for that, she was grateful. Her colleagues were kind, but there were moments when she caught them looking at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. They had all heard the rumors. A millionaire husband. A messy divorce. The infertility diagnosis. It was hard to escape the whispers. But Sarah had learned to ignore them. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. Yet, no matter how much she tried to move on, she could never quite shake the feeling that something was missing. The absence of Michael, yes, but it was more than that. There was a deeper, darker sensation that crept into her thoughts when she was alone. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, a sense of unease that followed her everywhere. And then, 7 years after the divorce, the phone call came. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Sarah's phone rang, the number unrecognized. She stared at the screen for a moment before answering, her heart already racing, for reasons she couldn't explain. "Hello?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of hesitation. "Is this Sarah Richards?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but there was something in it that made Sarah's pulse quicken. "Yes, this is she. My name is Dr. Julia Henderson. I'm calling about a matter that may be of interest to you. It's urgent." Sarah's mind spun. Her first thought was that this was some kind of mistake, maybe an error in the paperwork for her insurance or a follow-up on an old medical test. But the tone of the woman's voice made her uneasy. "What kind of matter?" Sarah asked cautiously. "I need you to come to my office as soon as possible," Dr. Henderson said. "I can't go into detail over the phone, but it's something you need to hear in person." Something about her tone left Sarah with a sinking feeling. Her stomach churned as she asked, "Is this about Michael?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a moment. When Dr. Henderson spoke again, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "It's about something far more important than Michael." A chill ran through Sarah, as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. She had no idea what this could be, but she couldn't ignore the urgency in the woman's voice. "I'll be there in an hour," Sarah said, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what was coming, but she knew one thing: it wasn't going to be good. Dr. Julia Henderson's office was in a nondescript building, tucked away on a quiet street in the city. When Sarah arrived, the doctor's receptionist ushered her in immediately. There was no time to sit and wait. It was as if they had been expecting her, as though everything had been planned in advance. Dr. Henderson was seated behind a large desk, a file in front of her. Her office was stark, minimalistic, with only a few plants and framed certificates on the walls. The air in the room felt heavy, like there was something important about to happen. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Henderson said, gesturing for Sarah to sit. Her expression was professional, but there was a slight unease in her eyes. Sarah sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You said this was urgent. What is this about? What do you know about me?" Dr. Henderson glanced down at the file in front of her, then back at Sarah. "I understand this may be difficult to hear. What I'm about to tell you is something you've been waiting for, but also something you never expected. Something that will change everything." Sarah's heart raced. "Please, just tell me." Dr. Henderson took a deep breath before speaking. 7 years ago, you and your ex-husband were part of a fertility trial. The procedure you underwent was highly experimental, and its results have only just come to light. But it wasn't just your fertility we were studying. There's more. There's a connection between you, Michael, and someone else, someone you need to know about. Sarah blinked, completely lost. What are you talking about? I never agreed to any experiment. I went through standard tests. I don't understand. Dr. Henderson hesitated, then opened the file in front of her. You weren't told everything back then, Sarah. Michael didn't want you to know. But your infertility wasn't the only issue. There's something else, something that. Before Dr. Henderson could finish, Sarah's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. It was from Michael. I need to see you. It's about the twins. Sarah stood frozen in Dr. Henderson's office, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand, her heart pounding with the weight of the message she had just received. Michael wanted to see her. After all this time, 7 years, it felt almost unreal. The urgency in the text was unmistakable, yet the mention of twins seemed out of place, cryptic. Twins? The last thing she knew, she was incapable of having children. And certainly, no one had ever mentioned any twins in connection to her past with Michael. Her mind reeled. The revelation in Dr. Henderson's office was already a lot to process. The fertility trial, the secret Michael had kept from her, she couldn't make sense of any of it. But now, the message about twins only deepened the mystery. Her thoughts were a swirling storm of confusion, disbelief, and dread. She hadn't spoken to Michael in years, not since he'd kicked her out, not since their marriage had collapsed under the weight of secrets. Dr. Henderson's voice broke through her fog of panic. Sarah, are you okay? I know this is a lot. But you need to understand what we've uncovered. What we were studying was a groundbreaking technique, a way to potentially reverse sterility. But there were complications. And your ex-husband, well, he was more involved than you realize. The words were coming at her faster now, like a cascade of water. She had to grasp onto something before she drowned in the overwhelming flood of information. Complications? Michael, involved? She swallowed hard, her throat dry. What do you mean? Dr. Henderson's expression softened with something that almost looked like pity. We didn't just want to reverse infertility, Sarah. The procedure was intended to do much more, it was a form of genetic manipulation. It was experimental. No one knew how the results would turn out. And unfortunately, no one could have predicted what would happen to the embryos after they were implanted. Implants? Sarah repeated, feeling like she had missed something vital. Her head was spinning. She was struggling to catch up, to make sense of the pieces being thrown at her. Dr. Henderson sat forward, her face tight with emotion. Yes, Sarah. The embryos. You were part of a trial that included genetic modification. The idea was to create embryos that were capable of withstanding infertility, of giving a couple a biological child, even in cases where one partner was sterile. But as I said, the process didn't go as planned. And your ex-husband, he knew more than he let on. Sarah's knees felt weak. This wasn't just about her infertility anymore, it was about something far larger, something far darker. The words, genetic manipulation, and embryos, reverberated in her mind like a bombshell that hadn't yet exploded. Michael had been part of this experiment. Had he known what it would lead to? Had he known there was more to the story than just her inability to conceive? Why didn't anyone tell me? Sarah managed to choke out. Why wasn't I informed of any of this? Why? Because Michael insisted on secrecy. The trial was supposed to be confidential. We were bound by a strict non-disclosure agreement. When you left him, it became even harder to reach you. But when we discovered the results, we couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Michael's involvement went much deeper than anyone realized, especially you. The shock of it all hit Sarah again, waves of disbelief and anger crashing over her. She had never asked for any of this. All she had wanted was to be a mother. She hadn't signed up for genetic manipulation, for secrets buried so deep that even she had been kept in the dark. "So, what are you saying?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "What's this about twins? What happened?" Dr. Henderson sighed, her hands pressed together in front of her. "What happened, Sarah, is that one of the embryos, the one created with your and Michael's DNA, didn't just survive the procedure, it thrived. And it multiplied. There was a second child, an unexpected twin. But the twist is that these twins are genetically identical to both of you. They were born after you left Michael." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Born after I left him?" She felt a wave of nausea rush through her. "You're telling me that I have children? Twins?" Dr. Henderson nodded slowly. "Yes, Sarah. You have twins. And they were born around the same time you left Michael. The procedure had unforeseen consequences. What started as an effort to help you became something much more complex. And now, those twins, your children, are out there. They've been kept hidden from you." "Kept hidden from me?" Sarah whispered. "How? Why?" "Because Michael didn't want you to know. He thought he was protecting you from the truth. But now, 7 years later, the truth can't stay buried any longer." The room seemed to spin around Sarah, her vision narrowing as Dr. Henderson's words sank in. Twins. Children. Her children. She had always longed for motherhood, but the thought of having children under these circumstances felt like a nightmare. Her whole life had been turned upside down, and now, in the middle of this chaos, she learned that she had 2 children, twins, who had been kept from her. "Where are they?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper, desperate for answers. "Where are my children?" Dr. Henderson hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. "They're with Michael, of course. He's raised them in secrecy, away from public knowledge. They're 7 years old now. And, they've been told nothing about you. But Michael reached out to me, Sarah. He wants you to know the truth. He wants you to meet them." "I don't know what to say," Sarah said, shaking her head, feeling her emotions in turmoil. "I don't know if I can meet them. I didn't know they existed." "It's not easy," Dr. Henderson replied. "But you have to understand, Sarah, these children are part of you. Part of Michael. And now, they need you. There are things they don't understand about their own origins, things they've been kept from. And there are questions Michael can no longer answer alone." The weight of the situation bore down on Sarah. She was reeling from the revelation, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing. She had always believed that her life with Michael was the one she had wanted, until it was shattered. And now, 7 years later, she was learning that there were children, her children, that she had never known about, children she had never had the chance to love and care for. "Michael wants me to meet them?" Sarah repeated, as if testing the words, seeing if they would make any sense. "Yes," Dr. Henderson said, her voice solemn. "But I want you to understand something, Sarah. Meeting them will not be easy. There are layers of deception here, layers that go far beyond anything you've imagined. Michael has kept secrets, and the twins have been raised in isolation. They have questions about their origins, about their real mother." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "So, what now? What am I supposed to do?" Dr. Henderson's expression was intense, her eyes locking onto Sarah's. "You have to face Michael. You have to face the truth. Only then can you begin to understand what's really happened. And you can decide what role you'll play in their lives. But remember, the truth won't be easy, and once you uncover it, there's no going back." Later that evening, after leaving Dr. Henderson's office, Sarah sat in her car, the headlights of the vehicles around her blurring through the pouring rain. She had agreed to meet Michael, to finally confront him after all these years. It felt surreal, like she was stepping into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The idea of meeting her children she hadn't known existed, made her stomach twist. What had they been told about her? What would they think of her? And what about Michael? After everything he had done, after the pain he had caused her, could she even trust him? As Sarah drove to the address Michael had sent her, an address in a quiet, upscale neighborhood she didn't recognize, she tried to steady her breath. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her children. And no matter how hard it was to face Michael, she knew she had to do it, for them. Sarah sat in her car, the headlights cutting through the misty rain. Her knuckles gripped the steering wheel, her mind a swirl of conflicting thoughts. She hadn't expected her life to take such a drastic turn. 7 years ago, she had been living in a world that felt secure, a world built on love, ambition, and hope for a family. Now, she was about to meet 2 children she never knew existed, children born of the very science that had shattered her life. Twins, the result of a procedure she hadn't known about, conceived in secrecy and hidden away by the man she had once trusted. The address Michael had sent her led her to a sprawling estate in a quiet neighborhood. The house was large, elegantly designed, with large windows and a pristine lawn. The lights inside were dim, and Sarah could barely make out figures moving through the house. A sense of foreboding washed over her as she parked the car and turned off the engine. This was it. The moment of truth. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. What would she say when she saw him? What would she say when she saw the twins? Her children? The very thought of it left her with a sense of both awe and dread. She didn't even know if she was ready to face them. She had no idea what to expect, no idea what kind of people they would be. The rain continued to fall steadily as she stepped out of the car and made her way to the front door. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced with 1,000 questions. How would Michael react? Was he going to be the man she once knew, or had time and his secrets changed him in ways she couldn't yet comprehend? When she rang the doorbell, the sound echoed through the quiet night. There was a long pause before the door slowly opened, revealing Michael. His face was the same, aged slightly, his dark hair beginning to gray at the temples, but his eyes were harder, more guarded. He hadn't changed in some ways, but in others, he was unrecognizable. The man she had loved seemed distant, as though the years of separation had forged a new person, someone she wasn't sure she could trust. "Sarah," he said, his voice calm but guarded. "Come in." She hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking to the interior of the house, but then, swallowing the lump in her throat, she stepped inside. Michael closed the door behind her, the sound of it locking echoing through the silence. Sarah's eyes adjusted to the dim light inside. The house was beautiful, sleek, modern, with expensive furnishings and soft lighting, but it felt cold, sterile, as though it had never truly been lived in. There were no photos on the walls, no traces of a family life. It was as though Michael had built this house to isolate himself, to shield his life from the world outside. "Where are they?" Sarah asked, unable to keep the urgency from her voice. Her heart was racing, and the thought of the twins, her children, made her stomach churn with a mix of fear and hope. Michael nodded, his expression unreadable. "They're upstairs, in their rooms. I want to talk to you first, though." Sarah's heart sank. Talk about what? Michael's gaze softened, but there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there when they were married. About everything. About the twins. About why I kept them from you. Kept them from me? Sarah echoed, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Michael, I didn't even know they existed. How could you?" "I know," he interrupted, his voice low. "I know. I never should have done that, Sarah. But when you left, I thought it was best for everyone to keep them out of your life. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me?" Sarah's voice rose, a mix of anger and confusion. "You didn't protect me, Michael. You betrayed me. You lied to me. For years." He closed his eyes, as though the weight of her words hit him harder than he was willing to admit. "I know," he said quietly. "And I've regretted it every day since. But I couldn't tell you. I couldn't let you know what I had done. The way I had used you. The way I manipulated everything to get what I wanted." "Manipulated?" Sarah repeated, the word hitting her like a slap. "What are you talking about? What did you do, Michael?" He turned away from her, running a hand through his hair, as though trying to steady himself. "It wasn't just the infertility treatment. There was more, so much more. I didn't just want to have children with you, Sarah. I wanted control. I wanted to create something that was mine and yours, but without all the risks. I pushed things too far, and when I saw the results, when I saw the twins, I realized I had done something terrible." The words didn't make sense. They felt like shards of a broken puzzle, each piece too jagged to fit together. Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process what he was saying. "You created them? You did this on purpose?" Michael nodded, his voice heavy with regret. "Yes. But it wasn't just for us, Sarah. It was for me. For my legacy. I wanted to have children, to have heirs, but I didn't want to risk my own genetic flaws. I wanted them to be perfect. And when I found out that the procedure had worked, when I saw that the twins were exactly what I wanted, I couldn't tell you. I didn't think you would understand." Sarah stood there, stunned. The man she had married, the man she had trusted, had orchestrated this whole thing, not just for a family, but for control. For power. And now, he was admitting it, as though it was some kind of twisted confession. "Where are they, Michael?" she asked again, her voice trembling with a mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, disbelief. "Where are my children?" "They're upstairs," he said, his voice quieter now. "They're waiting to meet you." Sarah's heart leapt in her chest. The weight of his words pressed on her like a physical burden, but her feet moved toward the staircase as though she had no control over them. She had to see them. Had to know if they were real. If they were hers. Michael followed her up the stairs in silence, his footsteps echoing behind her. The hallway at the top of the stairs was long and silent, save for the soft hum of the house's air conditioning. There were 3 doors, all closed, but one of them was slightly ajar. Michael stopped in front of the door at the far end of the hall and knocked lightly. "Girls," he called softly. There was no response at first, but then a voice, sweet and innocent, drifted through the door. "Come in, Daddy." Michael pushed the door open slowly. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she stepped into the room. 2 little girls were sitting on the bed, their backs to the door, playing with dolls. They couldn't have been more than 7 years old, but the moment Sarah saw them, her heart broke wide open. They looked so much like her, especially the one on the left, with her dark hair and deep brown eyes. The other, a little more reserved, had Michael's sharp features, but there was no denying the connection. These were her children. Her flesh and blood. The twins turned toward the door as Michael entered, their expressions curious but not afraid. They had grown up in seclusion, shielded from the world, but now they were face to face with the woman who had given them life. "Mommy," one of them whispered, her voice tentative. "Are you my mommy?" The word struck Sarah like a thunderclap. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but words failed her. All she could do was stand there, looking at the faces of her daughters, the children she had never known but had always longed for. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm your mommy." The twin who had spoken reached out toward her, her small hand trembling slightly as she extended it. Sarah took it, and as soon as their hands touched, she felt an overwhelming rush of emotion, love, fear, regret, and hope. These were her children, her flesh and blood, and she was about to begin the most complicated, emotional journey of her life. The air in the room was thick with tension. Sarah stood frozen, her hand still holding that of her daughter, the small, trembling hand of the little girl who called her Mommy. The child looked up at her, wide-eyed, her innocent face a mix of curiosity and wonder. Sarah's heart twisted in her chest. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, but the reality of it felt like a foreign land, one she had never prepared for. The twins sat on the edge of the bed, their hands resting nervously in their laps as they waited for Sarah to speak. They were watching her with eyes that seemed too knowing for their age, eyes that had seen more than they should have. Sarah didn't know what to say. Her emotions were tangled, her mind a whirlwind of confusion, guilt, and hope. Mommy, the other twin spoke up, her voice soft but firm. She had a different look than her sister, her features sharper, and yet there was an unmistakable resemblance to Michael. Are we really your daughters? The question struck Sarah like a bolt of lightning. Her throat tightened, and her chest ached with the weight of it all. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I am your mommy. The words felt strange on her tongue, almost unreal, like they didn't belong to her. For 7 years, she had lived without them, had grieved the children she thought she would never have. And now here they were, standing before her, calling her mother as though it had been only yesterday. She wasn't sure what she had expected this moment to feel like, but it wasn't like this. There was no blissful reunion, no overwhelming sense of joy, only a deep, aching emptiness, a chasm of lost time that she could never fill. The twin who had spoken, the one with Michael's sharp features, stood up, her hands still outstretched toward Sarah. Are you going to stay with us now? She asked, her voice fragile, as though she was testing the waters of a bond she didn't fully understand. Are you going to live here? Sarah glanced at Michael, who had been standing in the doorway, watching silently. He hadn't said anything since Sarah had entered the room. She could feel his gaze, heavy and expectant, waiting for her to decide, to take some kind of action. She knew the answer she wanted to give, but it felt impossible to speak it out loud. Could she stay with them? Could she even fit into their lives now, after all these years? Sarah began, but the words caught in her throat. The truth was, she didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she was ready for this. She didn't know if she was ready to face the consequences of Michael's actions, of the life he had built without her. And yet, standing here in front of her children, seeing the hope in their eyes, she knew she had no choice. She couldn't walk away from them. She just couldn't. Michael stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. Sarah, I know this is all overwhelming. I never wanted you to find out this way, but you need to understand that they are our children. They've been waiting for you, just as I have. Sarah turned to him, her eyes narrowed. Waiting for me? Michael, you kept them from me. You lied to me. You've lied to all of us. I know, he said quietly, his gaze steady. I've made mistakes. I'll never be able to undo them, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. For you, for them. I should have told you about them, but I was afraid. Afraid that you wouldn't want them, that you wouldn't want me. Sarah's chest tightened at his words, but she couldn't bring herself to respond right away. She was still processing everything he had just said. 7 years of silence, of lies, of broken promises. And now, there were these 2 little girls who needed her. They deserved more than just her confusion and hesitation. They deserved a mother who was sure of who she was, sure of what she could give them. The twin who had reached out to her earlier stepped closer, her small hand still extended. Mommy, please don't leave us again, she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." The words broke something inside Sarah. She knelt down in front of the twins, her heart cracking under the weight of their need. How could she have been so blind, so wrapped up in her own pain that she hadn't considered theirs? They had lived without a mother, without the love she had always wanted to give them, and now they were reaching for her, expecting her to fill that void. "I'm not going anywhere," Sarah finally said, her voice shaky but determined. She took both of their hands in hers, holding them tightly. "I'm here. And I'm not leaving you again. I promise." Michael watched quietly, his face unreadable. He didn't speak, but there was something in his eyes, regret, guilt, and maybe a little hope, that made Sarah wonder if he truly understood the enormity of what they had done. Or if he was simply relieved that she was finally here, that his family was coming together. The twins smiled then, their faces lighting up with a mixture of joy and disbelief. Sarah couldn't help but smile back, despite the confusion swirling in her mind. She had promised them that she wouldn't leave, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of her own promises. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about the hurt and betrayal she had felt. It was about them, her children, the daughters she never knew existed. "We have so much to talk about," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. "But first, I think we should get to know each other. We have a lot of time to make up for." Michael cleared his throat, stepping closer to the girls. "I'll give you two some space. You can talk, get to know each other. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, Sarah. But I think it's better if you ask them first." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. "And what about you, Michael? Do I get to ask you anything? After everything you've done, everything you've kept from me?" He nodded slowly, his face filled with regret. "Of course. I owe you that. But please, just give us all some time. It's been a long road for all of us, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want you to know I'm here, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right." Sarah stared at him, still unsure of how to feel. How could she forgive him for everything he had done? How could she trust him again after all the lies? But the truth was, she didn't have the answers to those questions yet. She was still too raw, still too hurt, and maybe that's what scared her the most. She had no idea how to move forward, how to rebuild a relationship with a man who had betrayed her so deeply. "Let's talk later," Sarah finally said, her voice weary. "I need some time to think." Michael nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The twins, who had been sitting silently on the bed, exchanged looks before one of them, the more reserved one, spoke up. "Mommy, can we show you our toys? We've been saving them just for you." The innocence in her voice, the simple, untainted hope that she had placed in Sarah, made Sarah's heart ache with love. She had missed so much. 7 years of birthdays, first steps, first words. She had missed it all. But standing here now, looking at her daughters, she realized that she could never go back. The past was gone, and no amount of regret would change that. But maybe, just maybe, she could start anew. "Of course," Sarah said, her voice softening. "I'd love to see your toys." The twins led her over to a small play area in the corner of the room. As Sarah watched them excitedly pull out their favorite dolls and action figures, she felt a sense of warmth fill her chest. These were her children, her flesh and blood. She had lost so much time, but there was still time left to make it right. As she sat down with them, watching them play, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that had been absent for years. The road ahead would be difficult, full of questions, of pain, of rebuilding what had been shattered, but for the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. Worth the fight. Worth the struggle. She had a family to rebuild, a love to nurture, and 2 little girls who needed her more than she had ever realized. The sun had barely risen when Sarah found herself standing by the kitchen window, staring out into the vast garden behind Michael's mansion. Morning dew glistened on the grass, and birds chirped softly as if trying not to disturb the stillness hanging in the air. But inside her, it was anything but still. Her thoughts were a storm of unanswered questions, unresolved pain, and the fragile threads of hope she was almost too afraid to believe in. It had been 3 days since she met her daughters, 3 days of hesitant smiles, careful conversations, and quiet observations. The girls had been warm and open, craving her love like sunlight. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still being kept from her. Michael had been distant. Supportive, yes. Present, yes. But something in his eyes told her there was more. Something darker. And whatever it was, she was going to find out today. She turned when she heard soft footsteps. Michael entered the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, his hair still damp from the shower. His expression was tired but calm, like a man who had made peace with a difficult truth. "Can we talk?" she asked without hesitation. He nodded, setting the mug down. "Anywhere you like." They moved to the library, a quieter place. Tall shelves lined with old books surrounded them, making the room feel like a secret chamber. Michael sat across from her, and for the first time since her arrival, the walls between them felt thin. "I need answers," Sarah said. "Not the polished version. Not what you think I can handle. I want the whole truth. Everything." Michael inhaled deeply, his fingers locking together as he leaned forward. "You deserve that." He paused, and the silence stretched just long enough to make Sarah's heartbeat quicken. "When we were married," he began slowly, "I truly believed we could have it all. Love, family, success. But after the doctors told us you couldn't conceive, I panicked. Not because I blamed you, but because I was terrified of losing the dream." Sarah's jaw clenched. "So you decided to throw me out of the dream instead?" Michael shook his head. "I was cruel. I know that. I told myself that I was protecting my future. That I'd build the life I wanted, even if it meant starting over. And I did. But not the way you think." She leaned in, eyes sharp. "Go on." Michael's voice dropped. 2 months after you left, I was approached by someone from a fertility institute. They were conducting experimental IVF trials. I volunteered, desperate for a solution. I provided samples, thinking maybe one day, I'd meet someone else and try again." Sarah frowned, confused. And then I moved on with my business. I threw myself into work. Years passed. Then, one day, I got a call from the institute. They told me 2 embryos had developed successfully. Twins. And that they were already born. Sarah's heart skipped. Born? To whom? Michael looked away. A surrogate. I never met her. She remained anonymous by contract. The lab had misplaced contact with me. Legal complications. Delays. And by the time I learned of the birth, the girls were nearly 3 years old. They were living in a foster care facility partnered with the institute. He looked up, eyes glassy. I went there. I saw them. And Sarah, the moment I saw them, I knew. They looked exactly like you. The same eyes. The same smile. Sarah's hands trembled. But, if they're mine. They are, he said, cutting her off. You were never sterile, Sarah. The tests, they were flawed. Or maybe manipulated. I don't know. But those embryos were created with both of our DNA. You're their biological mother. She gasped, the weight of that sentence hitting her like a tidal wave. Are you telling me, you used my DNA without my knowledge? Michael's face fell with guilt. I didn't know, not at first. I didn't ask questions when I signed the paperwork. Later, when I saw their birth records and genetic reports, it hit me. Somehow, they had samples from when we were undergoing tests during our marriage. Stored without our consent. Or maybe I had unknowingly signed something that allowed them access. Sarah stood up, her breath shallow. You didn't tell me. You let me live for years thinking I couldn't have children, and all this time, I had 2 daughters. Michael stood, too. I was afraid. Afraid if I told you, you'd never forgive me. That you'd sue the institute. That I'd lose them. Tears streamed down her cheeks now. You robbed me of their first laugh. Their first steps. Their first words. You stole those memories from me. I know, he whispered. I'll never forgive myself. Sarah's head spun. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. Not just from Michael, but from a system that had used her, taken from her, without her knowledge. But her pain wasn't just anger, it was mourning. For lost years. For bedtime stories never told. For scraped knees she hadn't kissed. For birthday candles she hadn't helped blow out. She turned to the door. I'm going to the institute, she said, her voice cold. I want every record. Every detail. And I want legal counsel. Michael didn't try to stop her. 2 weeks later, Sarah sat with a lawyer and a geneticist in a sterile, white office. Files and documents lay open before her. The truth unraveled in painful detail. Yes, her eggs had been harvested, during a procedure she thought was diagnostic. Yes, they had been fertilized using Michael's sample. Without consent. Yes, the embryos had been implanted in a surrogate as part of a secretive fertility trial. The institute offered a settlement, a quiet apology, and a non-disclosure agreement. Sarah refused to sign it. Instead, she filed a case. Not for money, but for justice. For her daughters. And for every woman whose body had been used without knowledge or permission. Her story hit the media like wildfire. A beautiful woman, cast out by a billionaire husband, discovers years later she is the mother of twins through a secretive medical trial. Headlines spun tales of betrayal, redemption, and corporate scandal. But for Sarah, the only thing that mattered were her daughters. In the middle of a media storm, with news vans parked outside her home, she focused on them. Their schooling. Their bedtime routines. Their silly jokes and growing personalities. The way they argued over who would sit on her lap during movie nights. The way they both liked strawberry jam on toast. They were healing her. Every day. Piece by piece. One evening, the girls were drawing in the living room while Sarah folded laundry. The television buzzed with muted sound. A news anchor's mouth moved silently on the screen. Mommy, one of the girls asked suddenly, why were you sad when you found us? Sarah paused, looking into those big, curious eyes. She set the laundry down and knelt beside them. I wasn't sad because of you, she said softly. I was sad because I missed so much of your life. I was afraid you wouldn't want me. The girls giggled. We love you, Mommy. We waited forever. Sarah smiled, hugging them tightly. Michael watched from a distance, standing in the doorway. He hadn't moved back in. They were slowly rebuilding trust, brick by careful brick. He knew he might never fully earn her forgiveness. But he was patient. Present. And grateful for every small moment she allowed him to witness. Months passed. The court ruled in Sarah's favor. The institute was fined and ordered to change its policies. A medical ethics board was formed, driven in part by Sarah's testimony. She became a symbol, not of scandal, but of strength. Her story inspired documentaries, articles, podcasts. But she turned down most interviews. Her focus was on her girls. One night, as she tucked them into bed, one of the twins asked, "Mommy, are you happy now?" Sarah thought for a moment. "I am," she said. "Not because everything is perfect. But because I have you. And you make me brave."